Being a parent or a caregiver and trying to be fully present and do your best at work, it's just hard. And I know firsthand because I'm a parent. But even if you don't have kids, it is likely that somebody you work with does, which means knowing how to make the workplace work for parents is essential if you really truly want everyone to be their best self and do their best work. So today, you're going to hear from my guest about what you can do to make work better for working parents. Today's guest is Dr. Ann Welsh, a sought-after thought leader on working parenthood. After leaving a career at Harvard to create her own firm, Ann draws on her significant training, research, and experience to champion women and working parents in leadership. She brings expertise in career development, emotional intelligence, leadership skills, and women's mental health to her work as a consultant, executive coach, and psychologist. She supports organizations and individuals through one-on-one work, group coaching for working mothers, and workshops and talks. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Ann. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ann. I'm really excited to talk about how to support working parents. This is a topic I've never covered on the show before. And as a parent myself, I have definitely felt the stressors of being in a workplace where you're trying to balance your at-home needs and your in-work needs, and then your work needs at home, and all of the ways that it becomes such a complex situation when you have other humans who are relying on you. So thanks for coming to join me today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talk about this.
How would you lay out the unique challenges of parents or even caregivers who are working? Maybe they're not necessarily caring for children, but they have dependents at home that they are responsible for. What are the unique challenges that they're facing?
Well, a couple. I mean, number one is just logistics, right? If you're caregiving outside of work, it is logistically challenging. And that's true, like you said, whether you have young kids or older kids or you're caring for aging parents. But essentially, your time is less your own, and there's just more stuff to fit into the day. There's more surprises along the way that you kind of those unexpected things you don't see coming. And so there is this logistics layer. But another part of what makes it really so hard is actually like a interplay between that and workplace systems that aren't set up for those needs, right? And so part of what makes it hard is that we're still working a little bit under the guise of the very traditional 9 to 5 and very much in person, and systems that were kind of set up around one parent or one person in a couple working and the other one not working to some extent. And so a lot of what makes it challenging are some of these kind of rules that we have around what work is supposed to look like that maybe don't have to be there anymore.
And I think it's gotten a little wonky now with the results of COVID too.
Yes.
Like flexible work, but now we're returning to the office and people taking more time and being more flexible and kind of being more willing to accommodate during the pandemic. And some of those accommodations are starting to be pulled back. So it seems like we're kind of in a messy place right now with what it looks like for organizations to give or to change structures or to create new systems or offer alternatives.
It's messy. It's inconsistent, right, across employers. And I think that breeds a lot of resentment. And I also think for some parents, especially for people that became parents during COVID, they don't really have a map of what it was like before. Like you and I were just talking, right? We have older kids. We did the go to work, show up, drop your kids, go to, you're in person all the time thing. But if you had kids in the past 5 years, you never had to do that. And so trying to figure that out now is really challenging. And at the same time, workplaces are set up so that we're constantly available, right? Because we can be working at home. And then this leads to very, very messy boundaries. Why can we work at home in the evenings, but we can't work at home during the day? Why can my colleague work at home, but I can't? And so I think the inconsistency is a problem. And this realization that we had during COVID that yes, we can do a lot of things with flexibility and do it remotely. And now companies kind of saying we can't, and employees not maybe fully understanding why, like what is the value of returning to the office. So I think it's a really interesting time to be having this conversation.
And I will just speak for myself. I mean, it's such little things, right? Like for me, my commute is about 25 to 30 minutes, depending on the subway. But on days that I'm in the office, that usually means that either I can't make dinner because by the time I get home, I don't have enough time to prepare a meal and without my children being so hungry that they've already eaten something else, which like you might say like, what's the difference? You feed them at 6, you feed them at 6:30. Like it's not a big deal. Well, my teenagers, if dinner is not ready at 6, it means that they're going to Chipotle and then family dinner is falling apart. So that half an hour actually makes a significant difference to me, where it might not seem like it makes a significant difference to an employer or to your boss or to anyone else who's kind of like, what's the big deal? You have a 30-minute commute. Like you just shift your schedule a little bit, but it actually matters.
And for little kids, that may mean the difference between being able to even have them in daycare. If you have to stay at work until 5 and your daycare pickup is at 5, then all of the sudden there is something that doesn't work. You cannot be at pickup at 5 if there's a commute. So you have to figure out an entirely different childcare system. It does make a difference. Honestly, even 15 minutes can make a difference.
Well, and the other piece of it, which we started talking about logistics, but there's also like the mental load. And this is the part that I really feel. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I feel like I talk about mental load all the time. So I think everybody knows what it is, but I recognize that it's still new terminology to some folks. So mental load is that cognitive capacity. It's the work of holding all of the things that need to be done in your brain and keeping track of who does them and when. And with the vast majority of that work falls on moms. It's not entirely on moms, and there's some really amazing shifts that we're making there. But I would say overall right now, that is mostly women who are holding that mental load piece. So that, like we said, is logistics, but it's also meaning that you are trying to keep track of everything, both logistically and emotionally at work and for your kids. It just ends up being a lot.
It's a lot to just hold every single day. And as a manager, right, you're doing something similar with your team often, right? Like they're not your children, but you care for them in a way, right? You feel responsible for them in a way. And so you're doing this for your team members and for your family at home. It's just a lot. All right. So we've been talking about the problems, but what do we do about this? Like, where do we start if we're a manager and we're looking at our team? We're like, let's start with, we can't change our company's policies. Let's assume that we're not in a place where we can have big scale change, although I hope we'll get a chance to talk about that later in the show. But for now, let's just start with what can I as a manager start to do if I want to support my team members who themselves are working parents or working caregivers?
Maybe the very, very first thing is what some people will call parenting out loud, but basically making it okay to be a parent, right? I think a lot of workplaces have this mentality of parenting is a detriment to your career. Parenting is a distraction. Parenting gets in the way of you doing what you need to do at work. And that's not true. Parenting is a masterclass in leadership skills. It gives you so many concrete transferable skills to use at work that it should be seen as a bonus. And so one first thing we can do is make it easier for people to be parents at work and talk about that. Have it on their calendar. Be public that, yes, I am using my sick time for a sick kid, because that's what parents do. That's okay. When we have a culture that sees the value of working parents, then there isn't an added element of shame or hiding of your parent status at work. So that's a huge one, actually, that can that costs $0, right? And it really alleviates a lot of the taboos around parenting. Another similar one is just working on creating a culture of care and empathy. We were talking about the mental load, right? And the emotional management that is managing, right? Whether it's your family or your team, you're doing a lot of emotional regulation for people. Now, ideally, we're doing more for our kids than we are for our team members, but that's part of the parenting gig. But we really are doing some of that for our team. And if we can lead our teams from a place of empathy and understanding, that benefits everyone, not just the working parents. Another one is try to find flexibility where you can, right? I think we think about flexibility as this RTO, to be in the office or out of the office. And that's what we often think about with flexibility. But there's a lot of ways to be flexible with your working parents, right? Even if you have a 5-day in the office policy, you might be able to have some flexibility around when people are in the office, right? Can we make it so that people could work a 7 to 3 shift versus a 10 to 6 shift or whatever works in their schedule? Could we make sure that we're in the office doing valuable things together so that it feels like there's a reason we're in the office? Can flexibility include the ability to work from home on some occasions, right? So that if a child is sick and a parent is taking time off, they can actually still get work done and be paid for it if they have access to the ability to work at home. And kind of going along with the parenting out loud, making sure there's no punishment. If someone wants to use their PTO to be able to go to a kid's soccer game or a play or, a parent teacher conference in the middle of the day, great, let them without any sort of prejudices. And then the last one I would say is ask, don't assume. I think especially with working moms, I see this more so than dads, where sometimes managers will make assumptions about what a woman does or does not want to take on based on their parent status. And sometimes the working moms want to take on more, right? I can give an example where a client was taken off a case that was going to trial because the assumption is she didn't want to have to deal with going to trial because she was a mom. And she was furious because she had put in the work before. Yes, it meant a lot of hours. Yes, it was going to be time away from her kid. She was okay with that for the short term because she wanted the work experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if we can just come at it from a place of communication and asking, what is going to work for this individual and include their parent status in that, then we give them a lot more autonomy and freedom. And that matters a lot.
You just said so many different things. I want to reverse and unpack a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So starting with the parenting out loud. Obviously, if I'm a parent, it's a lot easier for me to speak my experience and kind of say, oh, I'm waiting for a call from my kid's school. So if I have to step out of this meeting, you'll know why, right? I can verbalize some of those parenting things and try to normalize. If I'm not a parent, is there something I can say to my team members to still signal to them that it's okay to say these things? And I want to know if you have things going on with your family life outside that's going to require a shift in your schedule or some other thing so I can kind of show you that I'm supportive of that.
Yeah. I think ask, right? If you, obviously not in a prying way, but if your employee has kids, hey, how is Joe's baseball team going? How is, Susan's soccer practice? Ask about these things, right? Just make it kind of part of the conversation that kids are here. When kids show up on a Zoom call, if that happens occasionally, right? Say hi to the kid. Don't roll your eyes. Acknowledge that, yes, this is happening and maybe it's really not having a massive impact on work. But I'd also say more broadly, you can model taking time that is necessary for whatever is necessary. So maybe you don't have kids, but again, you have aging parents, or you have a friend that's going through something challenging or needs a ride to the doctor, or even if it's something that you do for your own wellness, that you can kind of be vocal about the fact that you also maybe take time off of work to do non-work things that are in some way enriching to your life. And so that can all be part of the same culture.
Amazing. That's so great. And whenever my kids come into my office, even though I tell them, don't come in my home office, I'm working, but they come in, I'm on a Zoom call, I make them say hello to the people in the meeting with me. I'm like, if you're going to interrupt me, at least you're going to be polite about it. And you're going to get down on camera and you're going to wave hello and say, hi, nice to see you all. And then you're going to leave my office and I'm going to get back to work.
Exactly. Acknowledging that they've come into your meeting, just like they would if it was a bunch of people sitting around a table.
Exactly. Okay. Another thing that you said that I wanted to lift up is the skills that parents have that are transferable to the office. Now, from your own experience or from your clients, what do you think some of those skills are, and maybe how managers might be able to tap more into that, or just be even more aware that those people have those skills or are likely to have those skills?
There's lots and lots of different ones, but I call them the 5 Ps of parenting leadership skills. And so the first is people skills, right? And this one's maybe obvious, but also maybe not, right? When we have kids, and this is true of birthing parents and non-birthing parents. This is actually true across the board. Even adoptive parents, anyone that becomes a parent and welcomes a child into their life, their brain changes. And one of the changes that happens is that you gain capacity for social cueing and reading other people. And so this is empathy, right? Empathy is hard to teach. And it's a great leadership skill, right? It is a great team skill. So knowing that your working parents have had growth in this area is a great thing to champion. Another one is processing skills, things like decisiveness, prioritization. When you are a parent, you are constantly drinking from the fire hose, right? You are learning new skills all the time, and you have to take in a lot of information and act on it quickly. That's actually true of people in leadership, both emerging leaders, new leaders, and senior leaders. And so you want someone that has kind of quick processing skills. Related is productivity skills, right? If you are a working parent, you have 0 spare minutes in your day and you have to be both patient and really efficient. And again, if you're telling me, who do I want on my team? Someone that's incredibly efficient, that's going to be someone I want, right? Another one is planning skills, prioritizing, anticipating needs. I always joke that a great tool or a great example of project management is taking your kids to the beach, right? You've got to think about who's going to get tired when, who's going to need to eat when, who needs sunscreen, when did they last have it on? Do I have all the toys? How long does it take to get there? And then while you're there, you're watching for safety to make sure anyone doesn't drown, right? You're prioritizing and then you're managing while you're there and getting everyone home safely. It's a lot of multitasking, and that's what you need in a project manager. And then the last one that people don't always think about, but I think is really important, is playfulness, right? Because children can bring out that playful side, and playfulness, there's a lot of good data that it increases our ability to problem solve, think outside the box, to get strategic. Again, all things that we want in an employee. So when you look at that list, you're like, wow, I just designed a great employee. If they have all of these things, this is great management, great leadership skills. And when both managers and employees understand that, then you can start honing it and even maybe make ties between people's life outside of work and life in work and those tasks that they're doing.
I love these 5 Ps, and I have definitely been very cognizant about taking management strategies and using them on my kids.
Yes.
But I have done much less of taking parenting skills that I've learned and really consciously applying them into the workplace. I think we probably do it much more organically because they're things that we develop over time. But I highly suggest managers take their skills and apply them to their children. That works really, really well. But one of the other things I would just throw into this mix, I thought I knew everything with my first kid when I'm like, oh, I'm a great parent. My kids sleep so much and they're on a great eating schedule. And then my second kid came along and I was doing the same thing. And I was like, this doesn't work. Why doesn't this work for you? Right? There's something about learning how to give each person what they need and understand how sometimes being fair doesn't necessarily mean treating everyone exactly the same way. Sometimes in a workplace, it really does. And that's why we have policies and we have to be appropriate in those ways. But sometimes it actually means understanding what each person needs in order to be their best. And that's when you're a parent and you have more than one kid, you definitely have to learn that skill. And then the other one is every time you think you know something, it's all changed, right? You finally figured out what it is to have a 4-year-old, and now they're 5 and there are completely different behaviors and whole new brain developments. And I think sometimes we forget with our team members that they are constantly growing and evolving and developing new skills and new capabilities, and that we can keep seeing them in new lights and giving them new opportunities to continue to grow because they're not the same person you hired 3 years ago.
I love both of those. And I think in you saying that too, right? All of the stuff that we do to help working parents actually just helps everybody, right? When we say, oh, it doesn't have to be one size fits all. Oh, we can support people as they are and kind of their unique situation and how they show up at work. That's going to benefit everybody, right? That's not just helpful for working parents.
Let's lift up now and assume maybe you do have some influence as a manager over your department's policies or even your organization's policies, or even maybe you just want to ask your boss to put this on their radar. What kinds of things should we be looking for, or what other kinds of questions should we be asking of our organizations if we want to help them shift at a policy or systems or structural level to make our workplace more accommodating and inviting to working parents?
Certainly, obviously have good parental leave policies and parental leave that's not based on gender if you can do it, right? Because gender neutral leave is good for, again, everybody. It's good for moms. It's good for dads. It's good for babies, right? Especially when fathers take parental leave, there are benefits to mother and babies, both physical and mental health. And it's good for gender equity at work, right? If women are the only one taking leave, then that sets up a distinction between men and women. And on the home front, and again, I know I'm talking in heterosexual couples, but when men take leave, they actually typically get more involved in the division of labor at home. And then that remains more consistent and even when everybody goes back to work. If mom's the only one on leave, that usually sets up a really uneven division of labor in the home, which actually perpetuates women's not being able to get into leadership in the workplace. So leave is a big one. But the other kind of 3 areas, one is manager and leadership training around supporting working parents, right? So you can bring me in or colleagues, right, to say, hey, here are the ways that this particular firm, this particular organization can better support working parents. Here's some of the bias that shows up in particular against working mothers, and here's how we can battle that. Here's what to say and what not to say when someone comes back from parental leave. So training. Another category is parental leave coaching. So if you have the financial bandwidth, and it's not actually that much money in a corporate sense, to bring someone on to coach people through that transition of parental leave, whether it's their first, second, fourth, whatever, that has huge benefits for retention, right? So parental leave coaching specifically helps people prepare for their leave and then re-onboard in a way that feels supported, that feels strategic and thoughtful. And what happens so often is that people come back and they're kind of left to sink or swim. And that sets them up for building frustration. And then even if they don't leave right away, they leave down the road because the whole process went so poorly. Parental leave coaching really helps prevent that. And then the last piece is anything you can do for childcare support. Childcare is so expensive. At the time that we are recording this, and I don't see it changing in the future, right, there isn't a lot of federal subsidies for childcare. It's a huge factor in being able to work as a parent. And it's one of those investments that has a huge ROI. So if your company has a lot of money, childcare support in some way, shape, or form can be incredibly important.
Such obvious and very clear and probably solvable for a lot of organizations components. So it's not like it takes a huge cultural transformation. It's really some kind of fundamentals. So I like that. All right. Any final tips or tricks for what we can do as managers to just create a good culture on our team for working parents?
I mean, I think it goes back to empathy, right? I mean, so much of what I hear when I'm working with individual clients as therapy clients or coaching clients, right, is that they feel really overwhelmed and they really want to show up at work. They're high achievers. They want to get it all done and they end up just feeling like they're failing at both. And when we can talk about it and when we can support them in any way, shape, or form, again, whether that's with flexibility and more empathic culture, it gives them the ability to succeed. Your working parents want to succeed very badly, and small adjustments in the workplace can really make a big difference.
I completely agree. And I'm just thinking about, again, back to when my kids were much younger and we ended up having to fire our nanny. And so I had almost 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom. I think this is it. I think I'm just going to be done with work and I'm going to be with my kids and maybe just until they're in kindergarten, first grade, and then maybe I'll go back to work. I think I was home for 2 days before I was like, get me the heck out of this place. I need to be working, which I sometimes think it's we have to remember or remind ourselves, people who are working because they want to work or because they have to work, right? There's a lot of work to be done at home. And if you are a stay-at-home parent, you have a tough job that's unfortunately not getting a monetary reward. But if you're coming to the office, right, we a lot of us want to work. We don't want to be stay-at-home parents. And so we're willing to pay for the childcare or figure out childcare situations that we can show up in the office and we can do our job. So it's important to just remember we all want to be here and we're all trying our best, and the more we can do to accommodate, the better. And can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
My best manager, was when I was going through the transition to being a parent. And, I think like we talked about in the beginning, she had no say. It was a large university. She had no say over policy at all. I had 6 weeks and that was it. But what she did that felt so supportive was normalize how hard it was and let me talk about it on a really regular basis, both before I had my kid and when I returned, right? And she, I think, recognized how being a parent was going to be a very large transition, how it was going to bring me a lot of skills and tools to the workplace. And she was able to kind of highlight those. And also, again, just to support that this is a transition when you come back, that it takes time. And I felt really held by that in a way that allowed me to continue to show up, even though it had been, again, a really short leave at the time. So she was wonderful. And it kind of was like a great intro to how to manage through this transition.
Love that. Amazing. And where can people learn more about you and keep up with your work?
One of the easiest places to find me is on LinkedIn. I hang out there all the time. It's just Dr. Ann Welsh. I also can be found online. My website is www.drannwelsh.com.
Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really hope that every manager now puts this into action and figures out what they can do within their own sphere of control and how they can lift it up to their organization as well.
Yes. And if anyone is wanting ideas of how to bring that conversation forward, I'm always up for, checking in, hopping on a Zoom call and talking you through the process.
What a kind offer. Thank you.